Mark my words, this safe, high-income ETF will be the best performer in its space in 2026, and I am betting big on it. If you guys don't know ticker TDAC by TappAlpha, I'm going to give a breakdown on this fund and showcase the power its sister fund has had so far in performance against some really popular names like NEOS, YieldMax, Defiance, RoundHill, and others. So I'm really excited for this video. But first, if you are interested in income in ETFs, you're in the right spot. Don't forget to like the video and to subscribe. Let's make some money together after that intro. So we're going to discuss the 3 reasons why I think TDAC will be the top performer in the high income space in 2026. And when I say high income, I'm usually talking 10 to 20% yields. I don't usually go much higher than that. I know we have some funds that do that, but they suffer from NAV erosion. And so I'm specifically talking about this more mid-level yield. They're not going to yield a 40, 50% consistently, but I'm very excited to see how TDAC performs. So the 3 reasons. First, TappAlpha uses a strategy that is very unique. We've seen it before, but the way that he implements it, and by he, I should just say TappAlpha as a whole, but I say he because I know the CEO. His name's SPYT. I've had him on the channel for an interview, which I'll link at the end of this one for those that are interested. He gives a phenomenal breakdown into the strategy behind both TDAC and the other fund, the sister fund, brother fund, TSPY, which we're going to showcase later on in the video. It is another reason why I'm betting big on TDAC. But firstly, we have the fact that these use the WDTE expirations. So I recommend checking out the website. The website looks phenomenal. We do see expense ratio 0.68%, a little bit high, but not nearly as bad as a lot of funds out there in the high income space. But they're utilizing this WDTE strategy that stands for 0 days till expiration, meaning that they are writing their options every single day on the fund. So what you're going to get with this style of fund, with the WDTE style, you're going to get direct exposure to, in this case, QQQ, which with TSPY, you get it to the S&P 500. You're going to have the income generation, and these do focus on income generation over growth. I will say that right away. They are income producing funds. So that is key. And it changes. It depends, especially with the yield. Sometimes you may get a higher yield. It depends on the underlying of the market. But all in all, with how we've seen TSPY perform, I have a lot of faith in how TDAC will perform with the distribution. And you do get maximized time decay with these because of those WDTE calls. You're going to have time risk and flexibility. Now, one thing that's really important with all of these income style funds is the strategy behind it and who's running the strategy. And I will say from what we've seen with TSPY, I have a lot of confidence in TappAlpha to continue the trend. And we'll get more into TSPY later, but that was only reason number 1. Reason number 2 of why I'm choosing TDAC is because we've seen TSPY be an outperformer. It has done extremely well. And again, I'll showcase that at the end of the video at some point. But we see TSPY doing super well, and it's writing its options, its WDTE options on the S&P 500. Reason number 2. We are now writing WDTE options on the NASDAQ 100. And we're on NASDAQ's website, but the NASDAQ has higher volatility than the S&P 500. And they're kind of discussing about some of these myths and whatnot, but I really want to showcase this chart right here. It only goes to 2018. I'm not sure why, but we can see that because it has fewer companies in it, right? We have the NASDAQ 100, 100 companies that are tech focused, and the S&P 500, 500 of the largest companies. The NASDAQ's going to have more implied volatility. It's going to be riskier to hold. Now, we have seen it outperform as well, which is another thing we should think about. Not only are we going to get better premiums, but if the trend continues, we should also get a better growth component with the NASDAQ than we will with the S&P 500. So I'm very interested in seeing how these two combat each other. I think it'll be cool to have a duo, a partnership of both indices where, yes, even if we're getting a lot more performance with QQQ. Maybe in some tough times, the S&P 500 holds up better simply because it has more holdings. But we don't know how the market's going to perform. So I definitely am interested in doing like maybe a 50-50, maybe even a 30-70 favoring TDAC over TSPY. But I know what you're thinking. Well, are these still high income? Are these still worth holding? Let's take a look at how we can compare TSPY's performance to all of the other issuers. Because there's one thing that I think is very, very key, and that is I believe that TappAlpha is very similar to NEOS. And I know a lot of you guys are NEOS fanboys like myself because the funds have been performing extremely well. Well, TappAlpha uses a different strategy than NEOS, but I get similar, I don't want to say vibes. They kind of have the same idea. They're utilizing options to create realistic income potential while also not absolutely shredding your growth portion, which although we are going to be capped somewhat on growth with these funds, and we know that, I still think overall the long-term slight growth and compounding of our distributions could make these big winners. Now, it's not going to yield like YieldMax. It's not going to yield like CHPY, ULTY, MSTY, nowhere near that percentage. I don't think it's going to go anywhere even near 20%, to be honest. But I do think we'll see a higher yield with TDAC versus TSPY. So we're going to pull in all of these fan favorite and well-known S&P 500 income producing ETFs, and let's see what comes out on top. So we are now in reason number 3. I'm choosing TDAC for 2026. Just to recap, higher implied volatility on the NASDAQ and better performance, and the zero DTE strategy that Sai Katara uses like a genius to make both income and even a little bit of growth. But I want to show you guys all the funds we're comparing. Again, these are S&P 500 ETFs, but TSPY is utilizing the exact same strategy that TDAC is utilizing. So I assume, we're guessing a little bit here, that with how well TSPY has been performing, TDAC will have a similar performance, if not better, for the reasons I already mentioned. Now, we're going to look really quick at all of these funds, the fund, the expense ratio, and the AUM. So expense ratio is how much we are paying to hold these funds, and AUM is assets under management, i.e. how big the fund is. So they have TSPY with a 0.77% expense ratio, which I believe it's a 0.68. I'm not sure if Seeking Alpha is incorrect, but maybe it is a little bit higher. But 100 million AUM. And this was a big deal because TSPY or TappAlpha said, when we hit 50 million AUM with TSPY, we will release TDAC. And they hit 50 million, and then it ran all the way to 100 million. So congrats to TappAlpha. Then we have ISPY, lower expense ratio, 0.55%, and 1 billion in assets under management. We have SPYI by NEOS, which is at a 0.68% expense ratio and 5.5 billion in assets under management. Now, ISPY versus SPYI, they're pretty similar. I usually favor NEOS over ProShares, but ProShares does have the win with the fact that they are cheaper to hold their funds. It just is. Then we have JEPI, and here's one thing that blew me away. JEPI has a $44 billion market cap and a lower expense ratio of 0.35%. Now, it has underperformed. It has underperformed, I believe, all 3 of these funds, but we'll see that in just a moment. So I understand why a lot of these issuers are trying to make better versions of basically JEPI. So TSPY is utilizing the zero DTE. SPYI, their strategy is relatively generic, but they do have some bonuses on taxes and whatnot. But all in all, they have been outperforming JEPI. And so I imagine these fund issuers are saying, hey, JEPI has $40 billion invested. If we can get $5 billion of that money into our funds, we can make money off of it. And I'll be honest, I'm kind of surprised why JEPI still has such a diehard following when it has underperformed these other funds. But that's just me. Then we have GPIX, the Goldman Sachs S&P 500 premium. It's 1.6 billion, 0.29% expense ratio, which is very solid. Then we get into the weekly pairs. We have XDTE by RoundHill, 1% expense ratio, 400 million AUM. WDTE, a 1% expense ratio, 74 million AUM. That's by Defiance. SDTY is our YieldMax S&P 0 DTE covered call ETF. And this one does pay weekly as well. 1% plus expense ratio and only 15 million. It's probably the smallest on this list because if you're investing in YieldMax, you just seem to be a little bit higher risk. And so their crazy funds seem to do better like Misty and Ulti and PLTY, which has done really well. SPYT, another Defiance Target 20 income ETF. They're trying to get a 20% distribution rate, 100 million, 117 million, and a high expense ratio of almost 0.9. XRMI, some of these are newer to me. We have the Risk Managed Income ETF, a 0.6% expense ratio, 43 million. SPYD is the High Dividend ETF by SPDR, and that one has 7 billion. And a 0.07% expense ratio. That's phenomenal. And SPHD, last but not least, Invesco's S&P 500 Low Volatility ETF, a 0.3% expense ratio, and 3.2 billion in AUM. Now, I do want to mention Global X has been surprising me. A lot of their funds are doing really well, and they're actually updating a lot of things and putting out new funds, which I know you guys are probably interested in, and I will make some videos on them relatively soon. So now we're going to pause and let's jump into this chart. And I'm just going to show you the power of the strategy behind TappAlpha's ETFs. I have been absolutely blown away by Seeking Alpha's fund comparison tool. Now I'm going to say, I'm not sponsored by Seeking Alpha, but I have like a partnership with them where I'm an affiliate. That's the word. So my link is down below for those that want premium. I like premium. It takes away a lot of the hassle of trying to find information and whatnot, but it is, I wouldn't say it's expensive. It depends on how much money you have, to be honest. If you're super wealthy, it'll look like nothing. If you don't have a lot of money, it might be a little expensive, but use my link down below if you're interested. It helps out the channel with support. Now, this tool that I'm using is free, so you don't have to have any premium account for this tool, for this comparison tool. Just Google Seeking Alpha fund comparison tool. And so everything is already plugged in here, and we're looking at the price return, meaning this is not factoring in dividends or distributions. So if you're looking for a fund that will do really well just in growth and have some nice distributions on the side, maybe not as high of a yield, I think it's around an 8% yield. The winner over the last year is GPIX. It's gone up nearly 7%, and I believe it does have about an 8% yield. Some of these have done really, really poorly. WDTE is down 20% on 19%. XDTE is down 15%. SDTY is down 9%. JPY itself is down 4%, and so on and so forth. And then the winner, second place, SPYI, which is a 3%, and ISPY is up 2.6%. So now we're going to factor this in to total return. And this is where everything changes. Because look at this. On top, it's close, but on top is TSPY, up 16.44% on the year. GPIX is in second place, right behind it at 16.27. And in third place, again, really close, is SPYI at 16.22. And then again, check this out. Who's our biggest loser? We see JPY down there at the bottom, but it's not even the biggest loser. We're going to scroll through these. I believe our biggest loser is SPHD and SPYD, but they're lower income. They're not supposed to perform as well. But my goodness, I'm really surprised that JPY, we've had a very decent market over the last year. I would have expected JPY to perform much, much better. And I know there's a lot of funds in here, so it's hard to kind of track. But we can see some of them hold up better in the dips. Some of them perform worse in the dips and then totally rally back through it. And it's really cool seeing this on the chart format. That's what I think is really unique about the Seeking Alpha tool, which again is free. Anyone can look it up, utilize it, use it for if you're looking at different funds. But this is outstanding to me. So TSPY is the top performer, although they are really close with GPIX and SPYI. So you could even utilize a fund of maybe 6 of these ETFs. You could do NEOS, you could do TappAlpha, and you could do Goldman Sachs and use both the NASDAQ and the S&P version. Maybe that'd be a good challenge for me to do on YouTube. But even though they are a little bit lower yield, I mean, the performance compared to JEPI, it is amazing. JPY's up 4%. You're looking at 4x what JPY has done. 5x. That is outstanding. That's outstanding. And that's not even just TSPY. SPYI and GPIX have both been very, very impressive. Now, we zoom out even farther. I do want to showcase these returns are based off of the entire trading history. So if the fund was trading for the last 3 years, which a lot of these haven't, you'll see they start later on. So TSPY started 8/15 of 2024, whereas we can already see like JPY at this time was actually really well in the green, up 28%. But since this time, TSPY has gone up that 16+%, where JPY hasn't gone up nearly as much. But SPYI still being one of the biggest winners. SPYI is up 65.83%. GPIX is up 54.86%. But I do believe GPIX also launched later. So those two are front runners. But I do believe TSPY, if given the same time period, would outperform both of those like it has. And it's not just the 1 year where it's outperformed. It's outperformed on the 6 month. TSPY is still on top. And year to date, which again is only different by a couple months, but year to date, it's still a top performer. So in the last 12 months, you would make the most money holding TSPY. And looking at TDAC, that is why I am so excited about this ETF. TSPY has actually been able to keep up with QQQI by NEOS, which is their NASDAQ fund, even though it's on a lower implied volatility underlying asset, which is amazing. So if we can see TDAC outperform TSPY, it will definitely outperform all of the NASDAQ funds from ProShares, from NEOS, from Goldman Sachs, and beyond. And so those are the 3 reasons. Recap. Dividend, higher implied volatility. the zero DTE strategy that's utilized, and with the history of TSPY being a top performer in its class, the 3 reasons why I'm choosing TDAC as my biggest investment for 2026. I'll be throwing some money in there and tracking it along the way. Again, if you guys are interested in my interview with Sai Katara, the TappAlpha CEO, it'll be popping up on your screen very, very soon. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you learned something, if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Helps me out a ton and lets me know what content you want to see in the future. And as always, don't forget to spread some love today.